Hello and welcome. My name is Alyssa and this is Into the Heartwild. And if you are sick and tired of seeing this look, it's because I batch recorded. So deal with it. There's going to be a lot of them like this. So with that said, today I am bringing you guys a recommendation video. This is my first time doing something like this, but I was recently inspired by two other videos that they had did short reads or reads that you could read in a day. And for one, I didn't agree with one because they were like books over 300 pages, and I was like, not everybody has the time of day to read a 300 plus page book in a day. That's not short. That's my personal opinion. And the other one, it was just kind of like the same tired old popular authors being recommended. And granted, I do have like two popular authors on this list. But I was like, I don't like that list either. So I was like, I'm going to make my own. Because if there is one thing I do love, it is a short story. And I read a lot of them. And I love to just devour them, okay? So I was like, you know what? I can do that. I can make a video like that. So these are my picks for a short story or a novella. So basically the qualifications to end up on this list was the book had to be under 300 pages. That was it. That was all. That was the going thing, because for me, when I think of a short story, it's under 300 pages, and that feels obtainable to read in a day. And there are quite a bit that are even under 100 pages on this list. So with that said, also just so you guys know, these are not in any particular order from like my favorite to my least favorite. These are just 10 books. I put them on a list and we're going to go through them together. So don't think I like one more than the other, because I genuinely enjoyed each and every single one of these that I'm about to recommend to you guys. Number 1. And They Were Never Heard From Again, A Yarn's World Tale by Benedict Patrick. This is a short story. It's about 40 pages long, and it's part of the Yarns World series. Now, I haven't read the rest of the Yarns World yet, but this particular novella, not even a novella, like this particular short story inspired me to pick up the first book, and I do eventually plan on picking up the rest of them. But the vibes that this short story gave me, like for 40 pages, I was like, oh my god, no. It was getting so many vibes, and just the mystery behind everything, the creepy factor, the story itself involving the two brothers. Like, it was just it was dark, it was scary, it was giving me what I wanted and what I had hoped it would give me, while also giving me just enough mystery to be like, what else is in this world? And the way that a lot of the information had been presented was just kind of like, here's the Bramble Man. What's the Bramble Man? You know, he's a Magpie King. Who is the Magpie King? What is that? What are you talking about? Like, it's presented in this way where like he just kind of like drops these things on you, and you're like, what? And other little tidbits like, oh, we're not supposed to be in the forest after dark, and you're just like, why? What's so bad about being in the forest after dark? So it had all of these great little creepy factors that I just genuinely really enjoyed, and it sparked my interest to pick up the rest of the series. So do recommend checking that one out. Number 2 is Judge Dee by Lavie Tidhar. So it's Judge Dee and like the rest of the title, but like the series is called Judge Dee. They are a series of short stories. They're all roughly around 50 to like 55 pages. And you follow Judge Dee, who is a vampire, and his human assistant, Jonathan. And Judge Dee is a judge who judges other vampires. He has a right to go in and say, you shouldn't have done this. This is what will happen to you now. And each short story is a contained tale around a different event that is happening within the vampire world. And he goes in, does what he has to do. He has to solve the mystery around it. He has to get to the final verdict of what's going on. And I find them just very entertaining, and I like the relationship between Judge Dee and Jonathan, because it's very you're here because you have to be here. kind of like that. You know, like it's just, he's just kind of like, you have to be here because you're my assistant. But he's also like, if any of you other vampires touch my assistant, I will end you. So there's that going on with it too, and I find that very entertaining. But I think for being such short stories, I feel like Lavi has managed to really create an interesting character, because watching him go through how he decides to solve the mysteries and come to his verdicts and everything are always very interesting, and they're always very different from each short story to the next one. And I also love the fact that like sometimes through each story he has pulled Jonathan into it and is always like, so what is your opinion on this? Because he doesn't only just base it off his own things, he kind of like looks for an outside source to see it from their point of view. And whether Jonathan is correct or not, Judge D will end up explaining their point of view and end up explaining how they came to the conclusion that they came to. And I just find them really fun and enjoyable, and they're, like I said, they're like 50 pages. You know, if you want to read a quick little mystery vampire, there's I think four or five of them out in the set right now, and you can just devour them all in a day. Number 3, now we're going to get into the ones that I actually physically own, and that is actually going to be Firewalkers by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this was actually the very first book that I ever read by Adrian. And basically, it's a dystopian world where the earth has been burnt up to a crisp, and all the rich people get to go live in the sky in space on well-regulated little space stations, and all the poor people get to live on Earth, sending up whatever resources are left to scavenge off of Earth up to, you know, all the rich people up there. And it involves a bunch of teenagers going out to a station out there on Earth that's like basically been abandoned at this point because it's so far away from the only town that's like kind of left. And you know, I don't want to give too much away because it is a short story, but like that's the basis of it. And I have to say, I like the explanation that Adrian gave as to why teenagers were picked for this particular mission. Because for the most part, I'm like a lot of people where I'm like, yeah, a bunch of teenagers save the world. Okay, that makes sense. They can't even figure out what they ate for breakfast. But I have to say, the explanation that he gives for this one, I'm like, you know what? Logically, that makes sense. That makes sense. You got me there. You got me. But overall, I just think it's very interesting. I like what Adrian does when he writes about, you know, like social commentaries on the rich versus the poor. He tends to do it quite a bit, and I find it very interesting. So if you haven't read this one by him, I do recommend picking it up. Up next, at number 4, we have The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillop. What I have learned is all of her books are under the 300 range, and a good majority of her books are standalone. So in general, I recommend Patricia's works, especially if you like very whimsical fairy tale like vibes where you just kind of bask in like the prettiness of everything, because her writing is very, very pretty. And The Forgotten Beasts of Eld is definitely in that realm. What I will say with this particular book is don't bother with the synopsis, because you're going to feel like you're lied to by the time you finish reading the book, because that's how I and my best friend felt when we read this together. But basically, it's the story of Sybil, who gets a baby handed over to her to like, hey, can you raise this baby? Like, people want to kill it. And then she, as the baby grows, you know, she gets caught up in between the war between the two different factions that this baby is involved in, and you find out she has the ability to talk and tame animals. She's, you know, a magician. She's not a magician, but like a sorceress who lives up on a mountain all by herself, like in her happiness and stuff like that. But you end up seeing the connection that she ends up making to this child, as well as the connections she makes when she becomes a part of the world of man, and the problems and the struggles that she goes through with dealing with that connection. So it touches on a lot of different little topics, and it's It's a slower read. It is. A lot of Patricia's books are, but like I said, I do think if you're really like into like the more soft, pretty, whimsical kind of thing, then her stuff is worth checking out, because she just has this very beautiful way of telling her story. And this actually has one of my favorite quotes of all time in this book. And you know, I thought it was an absolutely like beautiful quote when I read it, and it's stuck with me ever since. So yeah, definitely check out Patricia McKillip. I am struggling right now. Book number 5 is The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. So I have 2 copies here, as you can see. I have the standard edition that was released worldwide, and then, well, at least US wide, and then the Illumicrate special edition. I'm gonna tell you guys right now, quality wise, the standard was better. The Illumicrate, you just get this really cool dust jacket. But anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go with this one. So with this book, it is a collection of short stories about the saints in the world that Bardugo has created. And I really love that aspect. I love when authors are so in tune with the world that they have created that they create side information to go with it. So I really enjoyed that aspect of learning about who these saints are that you sometimes hear pop up in Bardugo's greater world of her Grishaverse. And I think each story is just long enough to give you that basic idea of like when someone tells you like, oh, like the story of Circe is this, and they give you like, you know, like a quick rundown of what it is. That's basically how each story in this book is done. So you could read them all in one go, you could skip around in it, you could just read one and be done or whatever, but it is something that you can get through relatively fast. And I really loved the added lore that she took the time to create for her greater world of the Grishaverse. Book number 6 on this list goes to The Tale of the Tailor and the Three Dead Kings by Dan Jones. So this is actually a short, scary story from 600 years ago. So 600 years ago. But it's based on the stories that a monk had written down that they found that he wrote down during medieval times, and Dan has brought it into the spotlight to show us like this story of like what a scary story looked like to people 600 years ago. Now, I will say the introduction that Dan Jones writes for this book actually creates way more atmosphere than the actual story itself does, because Dan presented the story in the same exact manner that how it was originally presented. So he didn't add flourishments to it. He didn't write on it and expand on it. He gave it to us in the exact same manner that it was initially found in. So there's no added to it. So when you think about it compared to scary stories that we have today, you're kind of like, okay, but I can understand. Like you're kind of like, well, it's not really that scary. But then when you think about the greater picture and you think about the time period, you're like, you know what? I can understand why people thought this was creepy. I can understand why they thought it was scary, because it does have its moments. It does have its moments where you can definitely tell that there was something going on where you're kind of like, someone is playing with interesting ideas here. But for me, it's more so the history involved behind it that makes it makes it so much more interesting. And I think it's definitely worth picking up and checking out. And at being, 50? It's 100 pages in all, but a good 10 of those pages is the introduction. But still, at 100, but also look at how tiny it is. Like, you're not even getting like a whole like the whole page isn't even covered in words. So it's like it's not going to take you long to get through it. I think it took me like an hour to read. So definitely worth checking this one out, especially if you do like learning a little bit of history with your books. Number 7 on this list is going to go to Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is one of the books where I don't actually know how I can explain it, because to me it feels more of an experience than it is knowing what actually goes on in the book. Like, that's the best way that I can explain it, because it feels like an experience. Like, there's a mystery, and you want to find out like what that mystery is, and the way it's presented, you're just kind of like, what is going on? Why is this happening? Is it another world? Is it two worlds? Is someone crazy? What is actually happening? And I really loved that aspect. It like sucked me in, and I read it in a day, maybe 2 days. I think it was 2 days, because I have work. But it is just one of those books where I feel like whenever I hear other people talk about it, they're always kind of like, it's an experience that you kind of just have to dive into. Like, don't read any reviews beforehand. Don't really read the synopsis, because I didn't. I don't ever read a synopsis, so that's besides the point. But just kind of just go into it and see what happens, and see how you like react to it. Like, I feel like that's the best way I can explain it, because that's just how it made me feel. Like, I was like, even when I was done, I was like, I don't know how to explain this, but I loved it. So definitely check it out, give it a look. You can read it in one day. It's under 300 pages. Give it a shot, see what happens. Number 8 is going to the novella The Warrior Within by Angus MacIntyre. So this was actually one that I just picked up on a whim. I want to say it was like $2 or something, and it was very interesting. So basically, you follow this main character who has like 3 different voices in his head, and each one has a different personality, and it affects him. And so when one of those other personalities come forward, it changes who he is, and he becomes that other personality. And I don't want to say that it's a play on the whole multiple personalities thing, because I don't think that that's what the author was going for, because when you get towards the end of the book and you learn where these other personalities come from, it doesn't play back into that multiple personality disorder thing. But I do have to say, I really liked going through and seeing how Carsman, that's his name, how he deals with blacking out and then like coming back and everyone being like, oh, you did blah 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 and you did blah 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 blah, and he's just like, yeah, okay, cool, I guess, whatever. And it's just, I don't know, it was just very interesting to go through. I enjoyed it, to say the least. Like, I did, like, it's one of those ones, like, I think about it every now and then. I actually have been wanting to do like a reread of it. But it's definitely, for me, like, towards the end, when you find out where the personalities and such came from, you're kind of like, oh, because it is a science fiction novella. It's not fantasy, it's sci-fi. So yeah, definitely check this one out if you haven't even heard of it. Number 9. This is big 9 on the list. So, and that goes to Galatea, a short story by Madeline Miller. This little book, 50 pages, punches you in the face. Okay? It just comes out of left field, and it just punches you in the face. Okay? So Galatea is the story of Pygmalion, who creates a woman out of marble statue, and then she comes to life. And, she's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and da-da-da-da-da. But from Madeline Miller's point of view and how she told the story, she tells the story from Galatea's point of view, and how she is treated by Pygmalion as being just this beautiful wife, and that is it. She is nothing but beauty. And he puts her in like a special little home where he keeps her there, and, you deal with how she views her place and her position in this world, and how she views herself to Pygmalion. And the end of the story is, I was like, oh my god, you go, girl. Yeah, that's how you get back. That's what you do. I know a lot of books recently in the Greek mythology retelling thing have been called feminism retellings. I myself am not a big fan of the word feminism anymore at this point, because I feel like a lot of publishers and everything like that don't really understand it all that well. But I do think this one does fit the idea of it being a feminist tale, because of how the ending happens and the impact that it has. Because it's not about making Galatea better than Pygmalion and everything. It was really about Galatea taking something back. and just the magnitude of how the final like pages like played out. You were just like, whoo, that is wild, that is insane, but I am here for it. You go, girl, you do it. And then, of course, you get a little commentary at the end from Madeline Miller about her research into the Tale of Pygmalion. So definitely worth checking out. Like I said, it's 50 pages long. If you're into Greek mythology and everything like that, check it out. It is officially released in the US because this is the UK version that came out a year prior to the US version. So it is now located here, and it is small and blue. A little slightly different, but it is nice and adorable and tiny. So definitely check this one out, though. I think it's right up there with like one of her really like, I think for me it's because Circe is one of my favorite books by her, and I think this one is right there. Just it's so impactful and just like boom. And so coming in at number 10 in this list, and this, like I said, this doesn't mean it's like my least favorite or anything like that, because this is actually one of my favorite series, but it actually goes to the Penric and Desdemona series by Lois McMaster Bujold. I love this series so much. This is like number 6 or something in the series, maybe at number 5. But it is a series of novellas. So as we can see, there's all of these ones. And then this is a full-length novel that just came out last year. And then these two are compendiums of the first 3 books, and then 4, 5, and 6. And then these are all like the sub-press editions that I've been able to get a hold of, because getting a hold of 1, 2, and 3 is very hard. But basically, Penric and Desdemona is the story about Penric, who ends up with a demon lady and all of her past incarnations in his head. So he has 10 demon ladies, a lion and a horse living in his head, rent-free, causing him trouble, making his life insane. And he ends up naming her Desdemona, so that because each person that this demon has lived in becomes the spirit in the head. So basically Desdemona is the spirit of the lady who was previously carrying the demons and such and everything, and they all kind of like take on the personalities of their previous holder. It's explained much more in detail later on as you get through the series and everything, but each story is just kind of like a moment in Penric's life. It's the first book is, you know, when he initially gets her, and then a couple books later he's, you know, like in his mid-20s, and then he's in his 30s. So it just kind of like follows his life and random moments in his life having to have this demon living in his head. And the presentation that he gets from going around and like dealing with other people, because the people in this world are kind of like, you have a demon in your head, that's technically bad, but also, can you fix this problem for us? You know, like things like that end up popping up a lot in his world and everything. But also Penric himself is just an amazing character, and I love following his life and all the things that he's going through. He helps a lot of people. He has, you know, sometimes he wants to stay out of people's business. He is the most adorable person with his wife, okay? The way he loves her and dotes on her. Beautiful. Beautiful. But it's just a really fun, like, little adventurous series, and each book is novella size minus the most recent one, which is a full-size novel. There is another novella coming out this year, Shadow of Knots, so I am looking forward to that one. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking out Penric and Desdemona, because it's just a lot of fun. And each story, each novella is a complete story. So, and like I said, and because it takes place at different times in his life, I feel like you can kind of pick it up anywhere and just kind of go from there, because you get just enough information for everything. If anything, I say start with the first book. That way you can at least get the basis and understand how Penric came to have Desdemona in his head and how it works and everything. And then from there, like, I don't know, just kind of go crazy, you know, because even when you actually read them in publication order, chronologically, the stories kind of jump around a little bit. So, yeah, definitely look into this one if you're looking for a short series that you can, you know, power through. So, those are all of my recommendations for short stories or novellas. If you guys have read any of these, leave a comment down below. If you liked this video, you know, like it, thumbs up, all that good stuff. If you've never heard of any of these, go ahead, drop a comment. If I did terrible presenting all of these, let me know. Be honest. Let me know if I'm bad at this. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.